Have you ever wondered why sometimes God allows the enemy to plan his attacks against you while God seems to be quiet? As it turns out, there's a very powerful spiritual reason God allows this to happen, which will make you worship God even more when you know what He is doing. Whenever you're going through seasons where it feels like the enemy is plotting against you, and God seems to be taking time to intervene, God isn't sleeping on the job. He's actually setting up one of the most brilliant traps against the enemy, and Satan doesn't even know it. Let me explain. You see, the devil and his forces are extremely arrogant by nature. That means, even though God doesn't want them to touch you, they purposely seek to provoke God by trying to touch you. So in many cases, God allows them to plan for days, weeks, and even years, so that He brings judgment upon them at the last minute, just when they are about to touch you. Every demon in hell knows that they're operating under severe limitations, and that their authority is nothing compared to the limitless power of Almighty God. But here's the thing. They cannot stand the fact that a mere human being like you, made from dust, can be so cherished by God and walk in such tremendous spiritual authority that even hell trembles. This hatred blinds Satan and his forces so much that they literally want to attack you just because they are not convinced you carry such authority. Satan becomes so consumed with jealousy and rage that he organizes his forces and develops elaborate plans to bring you down. But what Satan doesn't realize is that God is allowing him to expose his schemes completely before he makes his move. In other words, God allows the enemy to make all his plans against you so that at the very last minute, just when they are about to launch their attacks, God will show up to bring judgment upon them. Think about this carefully. God doesn't need to stop the enemy's planning phase because planning isn't action. It's just an intention. But the moment Satan or his agents move from planning to actual execution, they cross a divine boundary that triggers God's immediate and overwhelming response. It's like the difference between someone thinking about robbing a bank and actually walking into the bank with a weapon. One is just a thought, the other is a crime that demands immediate action. Think about it this way. When a police force wants to catch a major criminal, they don't arrest him the moment he thinks about committing a crime. They let him plan, they watch him prepare, they allow him to gather all his resources and recruit his accomplices. Why? Because they're building an airtight case that will ensure he faces the full consequences of his actions. This is exactly what God does with your spiritual enemies. He allows them to plot all day long, to scheme in the darkness, to gather their demonic forces and plan their attack. But the precise moment they stretch forth their hand to touch you, God launches a counter-offensive that leaves them wondering what just hit them. God operates on this same principle, but with infinitely more wisdom and power. He allows the enemy to reveal his entire strategy, expose all his accomplices, and show his hand completely. Every demon that gets involved in the plot against you is being documented. Every scheme they devise is being recorded. Every move they make is being monitored. And when they finally make their move against you, God has all the evidence He needs to bring crushing judgment upon them. Here's where it gets even more powerful. When enemies come against you as a child of God, they're not just attacking you, they're violating a divine law that was established before the foundation of the world. In 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 22, God declares, "Touch not mine anointed, and do my prophets no harm." This isn't just a suggestion or a request. This is divine legislation backed by the full power of heaven's throne. Every time Satan or his agents stretch forth their hand against you, they're breaking this fundamental spiritual law. It's kind of like touching a live wire that carries the full voltage of God's wrath. The moment they make contact, they trigger a divine response that brings immediate and devastating consequences upon them. The most powerful illustration of this divine strategy is found in the exodus of Israel from Egypt. God could have destroyed Pharaoh and his army at any point during the 10 plagues, but He allowed them to pursue Israel all the way to the Red Sea. He even opened the sea and allowed the Israelites to cross safely while the Egyptians watched. From Pharaoh's perspective, this looked like the perfect opportunity to recapture the slaves and prove Egypt's superiority. But here's what Pharaoh didn't understand. God was setting up the ultimate trap. He allowed the Egyptian army to commit themselves fully to their plan of attack. They saw the Israelites trapped between the sea and the desert, and they thought victory was guaranteed. They charged into the sea bed with complete confidence, never realizing that they were walking into their own grave. The moment the last Egyptian chariot entered the sea, God released the waters. In one devastating instant, the entire army that had terrorized Israel for generations was completely destroyed. Not one soldier survived to tell the story. This wasn't just deliverance for Israel. This was total annihilation for their enemies. The Bible tells us in Exodus chapter 14 verse 28, "And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. Not one survived." That's what happens when you touch God's anointed. This same principle operates in your life today. Your enemies may be planning, plotting, scheming, and preparing their attack. They may look confident. They may seem to have the upper hand. They may even make their first moves against you. But God is watching, waiting, and preparing to demonstrate why messing with His children is the worst decision anyone could ever make. When you understand that God is using the enemy's attacks as evidence to build an even stronger case for your victory, you realize that every scheme against you is actually working in your favor. The enemy thinks he's developing a strategy to destroy you, but he's actually providing God with more ammunition to bless you. God has promised to protect you, and His promises are not empty words. They're binding contracts backed by His unchanging nature and unlimited power. When He says He has your back, He means it literally. The Divine Intelligence Network is monitoring every move made against you. And the moment any enemy crosses the line, heaven's response is swift and decisive. This is why the prophet Isaiah could boldly declare in chapter 54 verse 17, "No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord." Notice the certainty in this promise. It doesn't say maybe or possibly. It says, "No weapon shall prosper." That's a guarantee. Every single day that the enemy spends plotting against you, scheming your downfall, planning your destruction, he's actually building the very case that God will use to bring devastating judgment upon him. When Satan and his demonic forces dare to touch you, who is God's anointed, they're essentially signing their own judgment papers. It's like a criminal confessing their guilt while the judge is watching. God doesn't need to hunt for evidence against your enemies. They provide it themselves every time they come against you. The prophet Isaiah gives us incredible insight into this divine strategy in chapter 59 verse 19. "When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Lord shall lift up a standard against him." Notice the word when, not if. God expects the enemy to come. He's not surprised by their attacks. In fact, He's prepared for them. When an army raises a standard, it's a call to battle, a declaration of war. So, when your enemies come against you, God doesn't just defend you. He raises His battle flag and declares war on everything that dares to oppose you. This tells us that God knows about every weapon being crafted against you, not just the obvious ones, but even those being formed in secret. The enemy can spend months or years developing their strategy, but the moment they attempt to deploy it against you, it's guaranteed to fail. But notice something powerful here. It doesn't say no weapon will be formed against you. It says no weapon that is formed against you shall prosper. God allows the formation because He's building His case. Every weapon they craft becomes evidence of their evil intent. Every strategy they develop becomes testimony against them in heaven's court. Think about this for a moment. Why would an all-powerful God need to collect evidence? Because God is not just powerful, He's righteous. He operates according to divine justice, not arbitrary force. When He brings judgment upon your enemies, It's not because he's having a bad day or feeling vindictive. It's because they've violated his law and must face the consequences. The enemy's strategy always backfires because he doesn't understand God's heart. Satan operates from a place of rebellion and lawlessness, but God operates from a place of perfect justice and love. When your enemies attack you, they think they're fighting against flesh and blood, but they're actually declaring war against the God of the universe. Psalm 91 verses 11 to 12 tells us, "For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone." Your enemy's attacks are not evidence of God's absence. They're actually evidence of your significance. The enemy doesn't waste time attacking insignificant people. He doesn't mobilize demonic forces against those who pose no threat to his kingdom. The very fact that you're experiencing opposition is proof that you carry something valuable, something dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. But here's what the enemy fails to understand. Every attack against you is actually an attack against God himself. When Saul was persecuting the early church, Jesus didn't ask him, "Why are you persecuting my followers?" He asked, "Why persecutest thou me?" The attacks against you are personal to God because you are personal to God. The beautiful thing about God's protection is that it's not passive, it's aggressive. When the Bible says in Psalm 91 verse 7, "1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee," it's describing active divine intervention. God doesn't just shield you from attacks, he causes the very weapons meant for you to turn against your enemies. This is why you must never live in fear of what your enemies are plotting. The same God who drowned Pharaoh's army, who confused the languages at Babel, who rained fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah, is the same God who has promised to protect you. The same power that created the universe with a word is the same power that stands guard over your life. Your enemies can scheme all they want, but they cannot change what God has declared about you. They can plot for decades, but they cannot alter your divine destiny. They can mobilize every force of hell, but they cannot touch what God has anointed. The enemy's biggest mistake is thinking that volume equals victory. He believes that if he can generate enough opposition, create enough chaos, or recruit enough allies, he can somehow overcome God's protection over your life. But he's about to learn what every enemy of God's people has learned throughout history. There is no strategy, no weapon, no alliance that can stand against the God of Israel. When God finally moves on your behalf, it won't be a close victory. It won't be a narrow escape. It will be such a complete and devastating defeat of your enemies that they'll think twice before ever coming against God's anointed again. Just ask Pharaoh's army. You can't, because none of them survived to tell the story. The next time you sense the enemy plotting against you, remember this. He's not building a strategy for your destruction. He's building evidence for his own judgment. Every scheme he devises, every trap he sets, every weapon he forms is being recorded in heaven's court as testimony against him. Stand firm in the knowledge that your God is not just able to protect you. He's eager to demonstrate his power through your situation. He's waiting for the perfect moment to show the enemy and all of creation why touching his anointed is the worst mistake anyone could ever make. So there you have it. Thank you for watching. If you love our videos, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel.